It's not just the family business, it's also embedded in the fabric of all of the parts of our culture.
A personal story told at a bar, captured on a cell phone.
Well, we're going to do a little tour of Tucker today.
All right.
Hadn't been here in a long, long time. Grew up here about 40, 50 years ago. And we're going to do it again.
And we got someone in the backseat doing navigation.
This is my beautiful daughter, Rachel, age 24.
Sounds good. All right.
We're good to go.
Stories of a quirky childhood retold and recorded on a drive on an unusual Atlanta snow day, documented in a published memoir.
This is the story of Tweety and the Pig, written, illustrated, and narrated by me, Kezia Olivia Holston.
The tale of a fleet-footed girl who became a mother, recounted in a children's picture book, written and illustrated decades later by a devoted daughter.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu.
A sacred story told to family and friends about a mischievous son, poignantly remembered and shared by a mother. The common thread woven through all these stories is that the words and images are mined from memory. And like alchemy, with base metals transformed into precious metals, they're turned into story gold. In this edition of AIB Presents, Mining the Memory, Unearthing Story Gold, we share insights into gathering and sharing personal stories. It's apparently good for the soul. And we offer encouragement from a man who crafted a childhood memoir. We also share snippets from personal stories that touch the heart, like this tale about a fearless little farm girl nicknamed Tweety, whose real name was Isabel Daniels Holston, an Olympic track star. The story is shared by the book's author and illustrator, her daughter, Kezia Holston. Here's an excerpt from the story's final pages after all of Tweety's big brothers have tried and failed to catch a pig.
Poor Papa Daniels. It seemed like all hope was lost. It was getting darker outside. Papa Daniels had 4 sons, and none of them could catch that pig. Tweety ran to her father and tugged on his shirt and says, "Daddy, Daddy, please let me in. I can catch the pig." Papa Daniels looked down at Tweety and saw the determination in her eyes. "Okay, Tweety, I'll let you in the garden to catch the pig." Papa Daniels didn't think Tweety would catch the pig. After all, Tweety was the baby of the family and she was a girl. Papa Daniels had opened the fence and Tweety took off chasing the pig. Tweety ran and ran and ran. The faster the pig ran, the faster Tweety ran. The pig made a left, and Tweety was right behind it. The pig made a right, and Tweety made a right with it. Papa Daniel's eyes popped wide open with surprise. "Run, Tweety, run!" Papa Daniel shouted. Robert, Buddy, Junior, and Arthur all rushed over to see what Papa Daniels was shouting about. To her brother's surprise, they saw Tweety in the garden running after the pig, and Tweety was right on its tail. "Go, Tweety, go!" the brothers shouted, waving their hands in the air. "Look at that girl run!" shouted Papa Daniels in amazement. Tweety ran and ran. She ran so fast that she ran right past the pig. The pig got tired. It stopped in its tracks and laid down in the garden to catch its breath. Tweety picked the pig up and ran to her father with a great big smile and said, "Daddy, Daddy, look, I caught the pig." Papa Daniels couldn't believe his eyes. Papa Daniels went inside the house and told Ma Vera what he had seen. "Vera, our baby girl can run, and she is fast as lightning." From that day on, Papa Daniels let Tweety work on the farm just a little bit, but she mostly ran errands for their family. She just ran and ran and ran her way right to a bronze medal in the Olympic Games of Melbourne, Australia in 1956.
What a lovely tribute to your mother.
Thank you. Thank you. That was my way of preserving her legacy.
Kezia Holston spoke about the book on AIB's At the Table program in October 2017, within a month of her mother's death.
And just capturing the story. She would always tell that story when she would get awards at the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame, because she's a member of the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame, the National Hall of Fame. And my mother, they always asked, well, how did it all start or whatever, and she would tell about how she caught the pig. And I would always listen to my mom, because I would go to the banquets with her when they gave her to the award. And when she said her award speech, she'd always talk about catching the pig on the farm.
Tweety, that is, Isabel Daniels Holston, went on to capture a number of prestigious medals for her talent on the track. In college as one of the heralded Tiger Bells of Tennessee State University in Nashville. After participating in track meets around the world, she settled in Atlanta and competed in state and national senior Olympic Games. She also taught school and coached track and basketball. Yet she's memorialized in word and picture as a swift younger sister who caught a pig and then some. Andrew Harvey, college professor, former police captain, wrote a book too, but it's not about his years fighting crime. It's about growing up a part-time Southern boy, titled Tucker and Me. He drove into town from sunny Pasadena, California with his daughter Rachel, just in time for something unusual in Atlanta, even for December, snow on the ground. But maybe that was to be expected.
All right, so I had a pretty unusual childhood, at least I think I did. And so my mother and father divorced when I was about 4 years old. Now that doesn't sound like much right now, but back then it was a big deal. In my neighborhood, there were literally no kids whose parents were divorced, none. We're turning into the Waffle House here because we're going to tell a Waffle House story in a minute, but let's finish off the other stuff. You want to get a picture of the Waffle House sign? That's right. So my mother and father divorced, and that left me in somewhat of a precarious situation to be raised as a boy without a father. And I think that changed me in many ways. It put, quite honestly, a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. I felt like I always had to be better than other kids. I had to work twice as hard because they had a father to mentor and guide them. And so I've kind of carried that with me, I think, throughout my life. So my father remarried. He moved back here to Tucker, Georgia. And they had a place which we're going to be traveling to soon. And what happened with the custody agreement was I would live in Los Angeles for 11 months out of the year, basically. Then 1 month out of the year, I would come to Tucker, and I'd fly by myself on the plane. They'd put me on the plane. It was glamorous to fly back then, by the way. That's hard to believe now, but it really was. It was a glamorous event. Part of the fun of the trip was the airplane. Everybody got dressed up in suits and the whole thing. So I would fly back here, and that's really the essence of this book, and that's why it's called Tucker and Me, because although I lived 11 months of my life, in LA and 1 month in Tucker, the time in Tucker was strange, odd, unusual, and it is really the juxtaposition of the two different lives. The Los Angeles area and culture, totally different than the Tucker culture, and so I had to kind of flip the switch a little bit. And complicating matters, or perhaps seasoning things for the book, was I had a very unusual cast of characters. My mom was a little bit crazy. My father was quite a character, and he had quite a tendency to drink, which made him even more of a character, sometimes not the nicest character. And I had a brother who was absolute nut as well. And so I had a lot of crazy kind of people back then, but the thing is interesting, they weren't crazy in the same way. They were crazy in completely different ways. And so as a young boy, I had to kind of navigate through all that. And that's really the essence of the book, is how did a young boy, and the book is centered from about 6 to 16. how did a young boy navigate those transitions back and forth and somehow successfully operate in one area and then come to Tucker and operate in a totally different way? And I have to say it was very difficult. It was really hard. Nobody babied me and nobody said, well, listen, here's what you need to do. Pretty much when I got to Tucker, it was like, hey, you know, we're busy and go out and play and do whatever you want and we'll tell you when it's dinner. And so it was kind of confusing to me because it's like, well, wait a minute, I thought, you know, I was coming here to spend time with my father and so on and so forth, and that it just didn't go that way. My father had a home-based business, and we're going to see the house where he had his home-based business. Nowadays, a home-based business, nobody thinks a thing about it. But back in those days, it was a really big deal to have a home-based business. He was an accountant. Harvey Bookkeeping Service, and I still have a card from that. I don't have it with me, but I do have a card from those days. And he was very successful in that business, but he worked like a dog. And so pretty much he'd spend every day and well into the evening working, and I was just kind of left to my own devices in Tucker. And eventually I kind of made my way and figured out what I was going to do, but it was difficult. A lot of the stories that I tell in the book I've told throughout my life. My whole life I've told these stories, and people have seemed to really enjoy them. A lot of the stories are humorous, you'll laugh. A lot of the stories are very sad, you might cry. I've had people tell me that. Some of the stories are utterly harrowing, and it's a miracle that I lived through some of the things that happened in order to be sitting here today talking. I'm glad I did, but I was pretty close a couple times. So I think that my childhood really was a unique one, and it was worthy of preserving that legacy. So what I wanted to do, my daughter's with us today, I wanted to write that down and preserve that legacy because I felt that, you know, the life that I had in these characters, these people, deserved some real small, tiny way of being immortalized, of carrying on even beyond my own lifetime, so that my daughter or anyone else who cares to 50 years from now can read stories to their children or grandchildren and say, well, listen, let me tell you about my father, and you know, here was his life, and he had all these crazy things that happened and characters. And it's preserved, and it's preserved in a pristine way in the book. And if the general populace loves to read it and enjoys it, that would make me very happy as well. But that wasn't the primary motivating force for that. So it was really a labor of love to finally write this, and I've been thinking about writing it for literally 40 years.
This drive down memory lane took him to several sites he mentions in the memoir.
We went to Memphis, went to Graceland. Elvis Presley's talked about substantially in the book. There's a chapter on him called The King, because he was the king in a lot of people's opinion, including mine. And so we did the Graceland thing and some things in Memphis. Went over to Nashville and did the Grand Ole Opry and some things there. Then we went to Savannah. We did a day trip to Savannah, which was fantastic. Got to see a lot of old history there. And we'll be in Tucker for a few days. We're going to attend the Tucker City Council on Monday. And they all have copies of the book. I've heard from some of them, including the mayor. And so I'm going to be there on Monday night to visit with them and see if they have any ideas for promoting the beautiful city of Tucker.
There's also a possibility the memoir could be turned into a movie, though a lot of people say that about their books.
I think the material does lend itself to that in the right hands. A couple of things that I think of, the kind of the theme that I took on in the movie, if you think of the movie A Christmas Story, the classic, where you have the story of a young boy who's going through a lot of adventures, but he's telling the story from the standpoint of a mature man. He's grown now. He's experienced, he's mature, and he's looking back on all of it and reminiscing and trying to make sense of it. That's exactly what I was doing in this book. And this is starting to look familiar to me. Starting to look familiar to me.
Seeing the sights, like looking through old pictures, triggered the memories and stories.
My father was successful, but he never really guided or mentored me or offered me any piece of advice, nothing profound. You know, son, there's one thing I've learned in life and it's this. Never anything like that. There's only one piece of advice that he ever gave me that I recall, and that was that I should take a typing class. And this, of course, is, 45 years ago he offered me this advice, but seemed to be good advice. And in fact, I did take a typing class and I learned to touch type, which is a skill I still use to this day. So I can't be one of those people that say, oh, my father never gave me any good advice. He did give me good advice, but that was it. You know, over my whole lifespan, that's the only thing I can remember where he said, oh yeah, you know, you ought to do this, and I did it, and it worked out well.
Walking up to the house he once called home, he recalled the maid falling off the roof, playing hide and seek in the front yard and baseball in a neighbor's yard. And then he knocked at the door with a gift in hand.
We're doing a little tour of Tucker here because I wrote a childhood memoir, which is this book.
Okay.
And this is a picture of me and my friend literally on the front lawn right here.
Wow.
And I wanted to give you this book if you don't mind.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Mission accomplished. The book tour continued. Months after that memorable snow day, Andrew Harvey spoke to AIB over the internet to offer some words of memoir writing wisdom and a reflection about his journey.
And so I thought, okay, this is a part of my life that my family members now, with one exception, my brother, don't know anything about. My daughter, who's 25 now, she never met my mother. She never met my father. She never met my grandmother. And so this is also a way of acquainting her with those people through the stories. And I felt that now I was old enough, hopefully mature enough, maybe even with a little bit of wisdom, where I could look back on these stories and make meaning of them much more so than I could as a child. As a child, I took them all in, and I mean, I knew what was happening, but I didn't really understand what was happening. I think to the extent that is possible, now I can look back and import some meaning to those stories and say, okay, this is what I went through, and here's what I really think was going on. But as a child, you can only assimilate so much. So I felt that now was the time, while I still have a good memory left, that's another reason for writing it now. And I could even see myself in the old folks' home one day where I don't remember much about my life from my childhood, but if I can still read and somebody's willing to give me this book, I can go back to my childhood in an accurate way. And I thought that would be kind of an interesting experience too. My first piece of advice is do it. Absolutely do it. It's not even a question, do it. But the real question is going to be, are you then going to try and publish those memoirs and share those with the greater world? That's more of a decision. I think the memoir writing process should be almost part of some sort of academic degree program somewhere, because the funny thing I found in writing my memoir, something unexpected, was how much I learned about myself. Because writing a memoir takes some very, very deep reflection. Some of it fun, some of it painful. But you learn a lot about yourself, and you understand yourself a lot better, I think, for having gone through the process. I think it made me a better person, a more reflective person, a deeper person. So I would recommend that everybody do it as a process and create that legacy, at least for their family. Beyond that, whether they want to publish it and share it with the public, that's a different analysis. But I think everybody could benefit from doing it, and I think everybody has interesting stories to tell. It's not just me. I think everybody has interesting stories to tell.
The healing potential of mining the memory to create stories also rings true for performer teacher Shannon Turner, aka the Story Muse.
It's something that anybody can do. It's true personal stories.
Telling one's story, she says, can help look at the wash of one's life in a new light to help shape the future.
You know, a lot of people will say that how you tell the story of your day or your life says a lot about you and your personality. So people will spin the story of their life in a negative light. Sometimes people will say things that are positive about the story of their lives. And we actually have the ability to transform our stories by how we talk about those stories from our past and our future. So if we will look at how the trajectory of our lives has happened and look at it in terms of resources and abundance rather than scarcity and tragedy, then we can start looking for opportunity into the future as well. And that's why these manifesting stories are so powerful. I've actually helped women in particular who are at a turning point, who are looking to perhaps leave their job and start their own business, to use storyboarding techniques to think about what is my network, what are the resources that I have, what is the timeline that I'd like to have, and then put all of that together into a story that they'd like to become true in the next 1 to 5 years.
Without an honest look at the past, she says, it's all too easy to stay stuck in one story.
You know, some people have something happen to them and that just becomes the story of their lives. I've worked with a few folks who are so mired in the grief of one thing that's happened to them, and they just simply can't seem to move past that one event. And sometimes helping them tell that story, give it a stage, and then move on so that they can have new stories happen is such a wonderful thing. But we really have to think about what is the benefit of the story, and then does this story need to have a life cycle that's over?
Turner has also experienced helping people shape traumatic life events into tales told on stage, including working with survivors of the 2007 shooting on the campus of Virginia Tech.
I actually went back and worked at Virginia Tech, where I was when I was getting my MFA when the shootings happened. And I was there for the first year afterward doing artistic response and community dialogue work, and then they invited me to come back in the 10th year to help honor the 10-year passage of that event. And people, even folks who have been healing practitioners and psychologists, were like, are you not getting bogged down with all of this grief? And I have to say, absolutely. There is a lot of grief in the work that I do. Certainly, because after Virginia Tech, I went and did another show called Trigger Warning about everyday encounters with trauma and violence here in Atlanta. And yet, to watch someone take a story about an encounter like that and organize it for themselves and put it on stage and kind of say, spoiler alert, I didn't die, I survived, I'm able to stand here and tell you this story triumphantly now. They are so empowered at the end of the day. It's not therapy, I always say that, but it has therapeutic value. We live in a world that tells us that we have to build walls, physical walls and metaphorical walls around ourselves. And one of the benefits of storytelling is that it helps us connect on a more human level. But because of the way that the world works, and we, especially I think men, have this tendency to think that they have to be impervious and strong. But I go into these workshops at the corporate level in particular, and men will tell me that they believe that in order to be a leader, they cannot show their faults. And yet when I challenge them to think about who are the leaders that they identified with the most, they talk about people who were able to show their faults, who were able to talk about the times that they failed and what they learned from it. And then as I help them from there to unpack their own stories of struggle and disappointment, then they're able to see that those stories will help them be better leaders as well.
And whether you write or tell your story out loud, it's worth doing.
I think both writing a story out and standing up and telling it have therapeutic value. I think that the opportunity for standing up and telling the story, especially in the process of rehearsing and delivering it on stage, is that you, over that period of time, create a certain emotional remove from the trauma of the event, and then you experience the opportunity of people actually applauding you for having gone through it. The opportunity for writing it is that you have it, you can see it, and you can put it away. So they both have therapeutic value, it's just different.
We end this program with a personal story told by this reporter. From a time when I was a young mother. It's a tale about how a pair of candles traditionally lit every Friday night to start the Jewish Sabbath, candles that are supposed to burn themselves out, didn't. Let's hear how the mystery is solved. But when I glance over into the dining room, I notice there's about a half a candle left in each of the 2 candlesticks. So I call the kids in from the family room. We light the candles. We say the blessings. I kiss them both, and then I send them back into the family room. And again, I make a mental note. Make sure to buy Sabbath candles when you're at the grocery this week. But a week goes by, the Sabbath rolls around, and I realize once again, when I reach my hands into the box of candles, why, well, there's no more candles. And I look at the candlesticks and I'm relieved to see that there's just a little bit of candle left in each. And I make not just a mental note that time, but before I call the kids in, I went and I made a grocery list, and at the top, buy Sabbath candles. So I call the 2 kids in, we light the candles, we recite the blessings, I kiss them both, send them back into the family room. Well, I was glad that I'd written down buy Sabbath candles, because by the next week there were no candles left in the candlesticks when I blessed and kissed my kids. And well, a couple weeks after that, I decided that we would go to our synagogue for a Sabbath worship service. Afterward, we have something called an Oneg Shabbat. It's kind of like a reception afterwards. And I noticed that my 3-year-old son was talking to the rabbi over in a corner. So I decide, well, I'm going to walk over and see what they're talking about. And as I approach, I hear my beautiful child say to the rabbi, "Rabbi, sometimes after my mom lights the Sabbath candles and goes back in the kitchen, sometimes I blow them out." Now, another mother might have screamed in horror and chastised that little boy. But you know, ever since then, I've wondered. Yeah, I've really wondered. How do we know that the mystery of God's miracles might not really be the stuff or the magic of a little boy's mischief? And that's my story, and it's a true story of the Sabbath miracle. So don't wait too long. Share your stories on stage or in print if you're inclined, or simply in the privacy of a conversation with a loved one. You're certain to strike gold, as long as the story's told.